Chapter 1: Echoes of Childhood. The garden was a world of gold that afternoon. Sunlight spilled over marble columns and the scent of jasmine clung to the air. 3 children chased shadows across the courtyard. Edward, crown prince of the realm. Elena, bright as spring. And Alex, her twin, already the soldier in play. "Slow down, your highness," Alex called, boots thudding against the stone. His laughter came rough and boyish. "If you trip again, your tutors will have my head." Edward spun around, hair gleaming like spilled ink. "Then you'd better catch me, General, or I'll make sure you're executed for negligence," he teased. Elena, between them, twirled with a string of daisies in her hair. "Stop tormenting him, Edward. Alex is serious about everything." "That's what makes him fun to torment," Edward replied. But his eyes softened when they met hers. They always did. Alex noticed, he always noticed. The way Edward lingered when Elena laughed. The way he found excuses to touch her sleeve. The way his voice dropped when he said her name. It was harmless then, innocent. They were children playing at love and war beneath the garden's old willows. Elena caught Edward's hand, breathless from running. "Promise me, Ed, when you're king, you'll make things better." "Better? For who?" he echoed, still clutching her hand. "For everyone, for people like the ones Father helps. For the soldiers. For Alex," she said simply. Edward's jaw tightened at her last word, but he smiled. "If you ask it of me, I will." She grinned, unaware of the weight her words would carry. Alex looked away, pretending to study the clouds. That night, thunder rolled in from the east. The palace whispered of rebellion at the border, of traitors and raiders and smoke rising where villages once stood. The emperor ordered the children to be separated for their safety. Elena sent south to her uncle's estate, Edward and Alex confined to the capital. Edward had raged for hours. "She'll be alone out there. I should go with her. The roads aren't safe. The emperor's orders stand." Alex told him, adjusting the strap of his sword. "You'd follow any order if it came with a seal. You'd chain your heart for duty." Edward's voice cracked between fury and grief. Alex flinched. "Someone has to." Elena smiled faintly as she mounted the carriage. "Don't fight. I'll be back by autumn," she told them. Edward reached up, fingers brushing hers. "Promise me," he whispered. "I promise." The wheels creaked. The rain began. She never came back. The news arrived with the dawn. Bandits, a broken bridge, a carriage lost in the river. The emperor called it an accident. The servants called it fate. Edward called it betrayal. He stood at the riverbank days later, staring at the twisted wreckage, his hands trembling around a half-burned ribbon she'd worn in her hair. Alex was beside him, pale and silent. They said the horses panicked. The bridge gave way. Alex murmured. She hated crossing bridges. She was afraid of the water. She wouldn't have gone near it unless someone forced her. Edward said softly, "That's not. Don't lie to me, Alex." Edward cut in, voice like glass. The river gurgled below, cruelly calm. Edward's reflection stared back. A boy of 14, eyes too dark for his age. Behind that reflection, Alex stood steady, trying not to shatter. "I'll find who did this, if it was my father's negligence. If it was anyone's hand but fate, I'll make them pay." Edward whispered. Alex swallowed. She wouldn't want vengeance. She's not here to want anything. Edward turned, eyes gleaming with something hollow. "You are." That look, raw, accusing, too close, made Alex step back. Edward's hand brushed his arm, lingering a moment too long before falling away. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke from the distant border. Thunder groaned again across the horizon. By the time the storm passed, Edward had stopped crying. The boy who'd once chased laughter through the palace gardens had vanished, leaving behind the faintest echo of his smile and the first shadow of the man he would become. Chapter 2: The General's Return. The capital had not seen such celebration in years. Banners rippled from every tower, and the people crowded the streets, chanting one name, General Alex Ravensheir. From the balcony above the grand courtyard, Crown Prince Edward watched the procession wind through the gates. He should have smiled. Alex's victory had secured the eastern border, silencing rebellion and earning the emperor's rare praise. Yet as the soldiers passed beneath him, his hands tightened around the rail. The man at their head rode with perfect composure, armor dark and gleaming, his cloak heavy with dust and pride. When he dismounted, removing his helmet, the world seemed to hold its breath. The same eyes, the same mouth, the same tilt of chin that once turned toward sunlight and laughter. For a heartbeat, Edward saw her, Elena, standing there alive and whole. Then the illusion shattered, leaving only Alex, older, harder, and bound by discipline rather than warmth. "Your Highness, the Emperor awaits you in the throne hall." A court attendant stepped forward nervously. Edward's voice was distant. "Yes, tell him I'm coming." The throne room gleamed like a blade. The Emperor sat high upon the dais, his smile a weapon sharpened by age. "My loyal general returns. You've done well, Alex. The Empire owes you a debt," he declared, his tone half approval, half warning. Alex knelt, head bowed. "The victory belongs to the soldiers, Your Majesty. I only led where they were willing to follow." Edward entered then, his boots echoing through the hall. The courtiers bowed low, but his eyes fixed only on Alex. "Rise, General, you've been gone too long," Edward said softly. Alex straightened, meeting the prince's gaze for the first time in years. The moment struck like a spark on dry tinder. Edward saw Elena's ghost behind those eyes. Her kindness turned into resolve, her laughter forged into silence. His throat tightened. "It's been an honor to serve, Your Highness. The border is secured," Alex said, voice steady. "I've read the reports. You achieved what no other commander could. Father must be proud." Edward murmured. The Emperor chuckled. "Pride is dangerous in our line, my son. But yes, General Ravenshair has earned it." Edward smiled thinly. Then perhaps the general should rest. The capital's peace might unsettle him after years of war. Alex inclined his head. "Peace is a welcome discomfort, Your Highness." Their words were polite. Their silence was not. Every glance between them carried the weight of 10 lost years. Later that evening, the celebration spilled into the palace gardens. Music drifted like perfume. Nobles whispered, drunk on wine and curiosity. Edward stood apart beneath the lanterns, a glass in hand, watching Alex from the shadows. He hadn't changed everything. The shape of his smile when speaking to subordinates, the faint crease between his brows, remnants of the boy who used to chase him through these same gardens. But there was a distance now, carved by grief and time. Edward approached quietly. "You look uncomfortable," he said. Alex turned, startled. "Your Highness, I didn't expect to see me lurking in my own garden? I used to hate these gatherings. Too many masks, not enough faces." Edward's mouth quirked. "Some things never change," Alex replied, cautious but not cold. Edward stepped closer, his gaze tracing the scar along Alex's jaw. "You've changed." She would have said you look older, sterner, but her words would have softened it. Alex froze. "Your Highness, Elena, do you ever think of her?" Edward whispered. There it was, the name neither had spoken aloud in years. Alex's expression faltered, a brief flicker of pain. "Every day, but I learned long ago that the dead don't answer," he said quietly. Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "No, but sometimes they stare back through someone else." Alex shifted. "I'm not her." "I know," Edward murmured, though his voice betrayed the lie. "But you carry what's left of her. The way she stood. The way she looked at me before she—" He stopped himself, swallowing the tremor that rose in his throat. The lantern light caught the edge of his expression. Grief, hunger, and something far darker. Alex bowed slightly. "If you'll excuse me, Your Highness, I have duties to attend." Edward watched him leave, every step a ghost tearing away from him again. His glass cracked in his grip. From the balcony above, the Emperor observed the scene, his smile cold. "So, The past returns to haunt him. He murmured to his advisor, "Shall we intervene, Majesty?" "No, let the prince remember what it means to lose. It keeps him obedient," the emperor said. When the night ended, Edward stood alone in the garden where they once played. The daisies had long since withered. The marble fountain had cracked with time. The moonlight fell on the empty path where Alex had walked away. Edward whispered into the dark, as if to both twins at once, "I lost her once. I won't lose you." The words hung in the silence like a vow, soft, trembling, and dangerous. Chapter 3: Masks at Court. The great hall glittered like a jeweled cage. Chandeliers spilled light over silvered armor and silken gowns, and the murmur of the nobility rippled beneath the music. The emperor sat enthroned at the head of the banquet table, his smile a blade honed on fear. Beside him, Crown Prince Edward raised a goblet and watched the gathering with practiced ease. Each lord, each glance, another piece on his invisible board. Alex stood among the honored guests, dressed not for war but for ceremony. The polished uniform felt strange on him, the silk collar constricted like a noose. He preferred the quiet of camps to this theater of deceit, but duty demanded his presence. "General Ravensheir," murmured Duke Mason as he approached, "our lion returns home only to be surrounded by jackals. Keep your sword sharp." "I'd rather keep my tongue sharp tonight. Steel is frowned upon at court," Alex said. Mason chuckled, raising a glass. "You'll need both before long." From across the table, Edward's gaze found him, steady, unblinking. Alex inclined his head politely, and the prince's lips curved in reply, too knowing, too intent. As the banquet progressed, talk turned to the border war. Count Hale, a sycophant of the emperor's, smirked into his wine. Remarkable, truly, that the rebellion ended so swiftly, though some whisper it was fortune more than skill. The hall quieted. Eyes turned toward Alex. He met Hale's gaze, calm as steel. "Fortune favors the prepared, my lord, though if you'd like, I can arrange to test that theory on the front lines." Alex replied evenly. Laughter rippled through the room, but Edward's rang louder, slicing through the tension. "Careful, Count. The general has a habit of silencing traitors faster than the court can whisper," the prince said, voice smooth and poisonous. The emperor's expression hardened. "Edward, this is a banquet, not a battlefield," he warned softly. "My apologies, father," Edward said, bowing slightly, but his eyes never left Hale's paling face. "Old habits. I merely wished to commend loyalty when I see it." No one dared answer. The emperor's hand tightened on his goblet, and Edward smiled into the silence like a wolf in velvet. Alex saw it then, the calculated cruelty behind the charm, the quiet war smoldering beneath every word. He stepped forward before the unease could spread further. "Your Highness, if I may, these men fought and funded the same cause. Perhaps we could honor them with unity, not rivalry," he said, voice steady but edged with authority. The statement was careful, diplomatic, a lifeline thrown across the hall. Edward's gaze flicked to him, sharp and unreadable. "Unity," Edward repeated softly, almost to himself. Then louder, "Wise as ever, General. Tell me, does peace taste as sweet as victory?" Alex met his eyes. "Sweeter when it lasts." For a heartbeat, the air between them shifted, charged, dangerous. Neither looked away. The musicians faltered, the courtiers whispering behind jeweled fans. Then Edward laughed again, low and amused. "Then let peace have its toast." He raised his glass toward Alex. "To the general who tames even princes." Glasses clinked. The moment passed, but something unseen had cracked. Later, as the guests danced and the emperor withdrew, Edward found Alex alone on the balcony overlooking the gardens. Moonlight poured over marble and the distant sound of music dulled to a hum. "You handled that well. Most men freeze when I bare my fangs," Edward said, stepping into the pale light. Alex didn't turn. "I've seen worse in war. I doubt war has my wit. War kills faster, and without pretense," Alex replied, Edward's laugh was quiet, almost genuine. You sound disappointed. Did you expect me to be kinder? I expect you to be dangerous, Alex said simply. Edward circled him slowly, like a predator testing distance. And yet you still speak so freely. I serve the crown, not its moods. That drew Edward closer. The scent of wine and cedar clung to him, heady and sharp. He reached out, adjusting the metal pinned crookedly on Alex's chest. A touch that lingered a moment too long. Then serve me, as you served the Empire, Edward whispered. Alex's breath hitched, his body tensing beneath the contact. That would depend on whether your highness still remembers who the Empire is, he said quietly. Their eyes met, steel against fire, duty against desire. Neither moved, though the distance between them had vanished. Edward's fingers brushed away, his smile unreadable. Always so serious, you'll ruin the mood of my court, he murmured. He stepped back, but the ghost of his touch remained, warm, burning, impossible to forget. When the banquet ended, Alex rode through the silent streets toward his quarters. Behind him, laughter echoed faintly from the palace, brittle as glass. He tried to shake the memory of Edward's gaze, the weight of his words. In the moonlit halls above, Edward watched from the balcony, one hand still tingling with the echo of contact. Still the loyal one, he murmured, half to the night, half to the ghost beside him. You won't run. Not yet. The wind carried the scent of wine and wilted roses. The court would sleep, but Edward did not. The game had begun. Chapter 4: The Crown's Interest. Rain fell soft and relentless over the capital, drumming against the palace windows like an unending whisper. The war was over, the court subdued, yet peace had turned into something colder. A silence full of watching eyes and quiet commands. General Alex Ravensheir had grown used to summons, but this one felt different. The message bore the crown prince's seal alone, not the emperor's. Private audience. Tonight. He hesitated before entering Edward's chambers. The guards bowed him through, their faces unreadable. Inside, the fire cast a low amber glow over polished mahogany and maps sprawled across a long table. Edward stood behind it, his crown discarded beside a half-filled glass. General, you're punctual. I admire that, Edward said without turning. I was ordered, Alex replied, stopping a measured distance away. Still, you obeyed. Edward faced him now, eyes reflecting firelight. Tell me, does obedience come easily to you, or do you simply hide the resentment well? Alex's jaw tightened. My loyalty is to the Empire. Not to me, then? How dutiful. Edward's smile was sharp. He circled the table, close enough that Alex could feel the warmth radiating from him. You've been avoiding my invitations to supper, my hunts, my councils. One might think my most decorated general has grown indifferent to his prince. I've had duties outside the palace, soldiers to train, reports to finalize, Alex said evenly. Edward leaned in slightly. You mean excuses to escape? Their eyes met, steel clashing with silk. The air between them thickened, neither yielding. I don't play games, Your Highness, Alex said. Every man at court plays a game. The difference is that most are too clumsy to admit it. Edward murmured. He walked past Alex, brushing against his shoulder as if by accident. I've been considering a change in your assignment. You spend so much time at the barracks. Why not closer to me? Protection, after all, begins at the crown. Alex turned sharply. My position is already clear. So it seems. But tell me, would you refuse if I requested your service directly? Edward interrupted, voice smooth. There was no safe answer, and Edward knew it. The silence stretched between them until the fire cracked, breaking the spell. Edward poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Alex. Their fingers brushed. The contact lingered a fraction too long. Drink, you've earned it, Edward said softly. Alex accepted, though his posture stayed rigid. Your Highness, if this is about my performance. It's not, it's about loyalty. You've shown me more of it than half the nobles groveling in that hall. And yet, you look at me as if I'm still a boy you pity, Edward said. Alex's breath caught. I don't pity you, don't you? Edward's voice dropped to a whisper. You pity the man who loved your sister. You pity the prince chained by his father. But you don't see me. You see what you want to remember. Alex's composure faltered. You're mistaken. Edward smiled faintly. Then prove it. How? Stay by my side. Accept the post I'm offering, commander of my personal guard. Alex froze. That's not an offer. That's an order. Perhaps, but I prefer to think of it as trust. Edward said, swirling the wine. The firelight flickered across his face. Half warmth, half threat. Serve me, Alex. Not as a soldier bound by duty, but as the man I choose to keep close. Alex's throat worked silently. You speak of trust, but all I hear is possession, he said at last. Edward's hand came up, brushing against the collar of Alex's uniform. Maybe they're the same thing. Alex stepped back, his pulse hammering. You're crossing lines, Your Highness. Edward's smile didn't waver. Lines are for men afraid to want. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Alex bowed stiffly. If that's your command, I'll obey. But don't mistake obedience for devotion. Edward's eyes gleamed. Oh, I never do. When Alex left, the rain had turned to mist. His footsteps echoed down the marble corridor, each one heavier than the last. Behind him, the door closed with a quiet finality. Edward remained by the fire, the glass untouched in his hand. He traced the rim with a finger and whispered to the flames. You can call it duty, Alex. I'll call it fate. Outside, thunder rolled over the palace, drowning the sound of laughter from the distant court. Within those walls, one command had changed everything, the beginning of a bond neither man could undo. Chapter 5, The Emperor's Suspicion. The palace had learned to whisper. Since Edward's rise in influence, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Every servant cautious, every noble listening for the wrong name spoken too loud. Alex walked those echoing halls like a shadow, his new post chaining him to the crown prince's side. It was meant to be an honor, felt like surveillance. That morning, a messenger intercepted him before he reached the training yard. The Emperor requests your presence. Alone. Alex followed the summons through corridors lined with tapestries of conquest and ruin. The guards at the throne room doors bowed him inside, sealing the heavy doors behind him. The Emperor sat at a desk, not the throne, a rare sight. His hair had gone more silver than gold, but his eyes, sharp and pale as winter steel, missed nothing. General Ravenshayer, come, sit, he said. Alex bowed. Your Majesty. Richard studied him a long moment before speaking again. You've been close to my son lately. I serve where I'm assigned. Assigned, the Emperor repeated, smiling without warmth. Edward's idea, of course. He has a fondness for acquiring what he cannot control. Alex kept his gaze level. The crown prince values loyalty. The Emperor laughed softly. Loyalty, the word of fools and kings. Tell me, do you trust him? Alex hesitated. He is my commander. That isn't what I asked. The silence stretched. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the distant hills. Finally, Alex said, he fights for the Empire. That's enough. The Emperor leaned forward, eyes narrowing. My son doesn't fight for the Empire. He fights to own it. He poured wine into 2 cups, handing one across the table. You're a soldier, General. You've seen men corrupted by power. You've seen what obsession does. Alex didn't drink. With respect, Your Majesty, I'm not here to judge the royal family. Then you're a fool, because if you don't choose a side, you'll end up crushed between them. The Emperor said softly. He stood, turning toward the window. I've seen how he looks at you, as if you're both weapon and weakness. If he ever turns that hunger on the throne, you'll be standing in his way, or beside him. And either choice will destroy you. Alex's voice was quiet. Your Majesty underestimates his son's restraint. Restraint. Richard turned, his expression suddenly fierce. He's his mother's beauty and my ambition without either of our mercy. You think I don't know what burns in him? I saw it the day your sister died. The words cut sharp through the air. Alex froze. You know of that? The Emperor's eyes softened, just a fraction. I know enough to fear it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Watch him, and when the time comes, choose the Empire over the boy. Alex met his gaze. If that time comes, I'll do what must be done. Good. Then perhaps one of us will survive what's coming. The Emperor smiled thinly. That evening, Edward found Alex on the battlements, overlooking the dark sweep of the city below. You disappeared this morning. My father keeps you busy? Edward said. Alex didn't turn. He asked about the state of the troops. Did he? And did he ask about me? Edward stepped closer, his tone almost casual. He asked about the Empire, Alex said, choosing his words carefully. Ah, then he asked about me. Edward's lips curved faintly. The wind carried the scent of rain between them. Edward stood beside him now, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. My father thinks he can turn my allies against me. He forgets loyalty is not something you command. It's something you earn. Edward murmured. Alex looked at him. And have you earned mine, your highness? Edward's eyes glinted. You're still here, aren't you? By order. By choice, Edward countered softly. Don't pretend duty chains you. If you wanted to leave, you would have found a way. Alex exhaled, slow and measured. You give me too much credit. Or not enough. Their eyes met again, something unspoken moving between them. Half challenge, half confession. Edward reached out suddenly, adjusting the clasp on Alex's cloak, fingers brushing his throat. If my father warns you against me, remember this. He fears what he doesn't understand. He said quietly, and what is that? You, because you make me human, and that terrifies him. Edward whispered. Alex stepped back, pulse quickening. You mistake humanity for weakness. Maybe, but weakness can be beautiful, Edward said. Later, when Alex returned to his quarters, he found a sealed parchment waiting on his desk. No crest, no mark. Only 5 words in sharp, imperial script. The Emperor's eyes are everywhere. He looked toward the window, the city lights burning like distant stars below. Caught between the crown and the throne, Alex understood at last. Neutrality was no longer possible. Whatever side he chose, it would cost him everything. Chapter 6: The Storm Before Dawn. The palace slept under a restless sky. Wind howled along the corridors, rattling the stained glass windows with the promise of rain. Alex had just dismissed the night guards when a voice came from behind him. General! He turned. Edward stood in the dim light of the hall. No crown, no attendants, only shadows clinging to him like armor. It's late, your highness, you should rest, Alex said. Edward's smile was faint. Rest is a luxury for men without empires to lose. Walk with me. Without waiting for an answer, he turned and strode down the corridor. Alex followed reluctantly, boots echoing on marble until they reached the strategy room, a chamber of maps and candlelight. Stormlight flashed across the windows, casting fractured patterns over the table. Edward gestured to the maps. The Emperor is moving troops north again. He means to remind the nobles who holds the leash. Alex crossed his arms. Then we tighten security at the capital. My men can. No. He's provoking me. You don't see it? Every deployment, every whisper, it's bait. He wants me to strike first. Edward cut him off. Alex's jaw tensed. Then don't. Outthink him. Edward laughed bitterly. Outthink him? I've been outthinking him since I was 12. He only respects power, Alex, fear. And I've learned to wield both. His voice cracked on the last word. He turned away, hands braced on the table. He let her die, Elena. He called it an accident, but he sent her there. Away from me. Away from safety. He whispered. The name hit the air like a wound reopening. Alex said nothing. Edward's shoulders trembled. Do you ever think of her? He asked quietly. Every day, but she's gone. No amount of hate will bring her back. Alex replied. Edward looked up, eyes blazing with something between grief and hunger. No amount of obedience will either. He stepped closer. You always hide behind duty, behind honor. But tell me, what has it ever given you, except chains? I chose those chains. They keep me from becoming the kind of man who mistakes power for purpose. Alex said, his voice low but steady. And yet you serve one. Edward's words struck like a blade. He moved closer still, until Alex could see the flicker of lightning reflected in his eyes. You think I don't see it? Edward murmured. How you look at me. Torn between loyalty and something you refuse to name. Alex stiffened. You're imagining things. Am I? Maybe I am. Maybe I see ghosts everywhere. Edward's voice softened, dangerous in its calm. He reached out suddenly, catching Alex's wrist. When I look at you, I see her. I hear her laugh. I remember the promise I broke. Let go, Alex warned, but Edward didn't. His thumb brushed against Alex's pulse, and his breath hitched. She's gone, and you're all that's left. The storm outside broke open, rain slashing against the glass. And in that crash of thunder, Edward leaned in and kissed him. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Time, breath, reason. The taste of rain and wine, the heat of skin, the shatter of everything unspoken. Then Alex shoved him back. What the hell do you think you're doing? He snapped, wiping his mouth as if burned. Edward stared at him, eyes wild. You don't understand, No, you don't. You're not grieving anymore, Edward. You're drowning, and you're trying to drag me with you. Alex cut him off. Edward flinched as if struck. Is that what you think this is? I think you've forgotten where your heart ends and your power begins. Alex said through his teeth. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. The candles flickered in the drafts, their light trembling across Edward's face. Half prince, half ruin. You think you can save me, you can't. You're already part of the wreckage. Edward said finally. I serve the Empire, not your ghosts. Alex said, voice flat. Edward laughed, low and bitter. Then serve it well, General, because I'll burn it before I let it take you from me. Alex turned and left before the words could settle. The door slammed behind him, echoing down the corridor like the strike of judgment. When Edward was alone again, he pressed his hand to his lips, the taste of defiance and regret still there. Outside, the storm raged until dawn, hammering the palace walls, washing away nothing. And somewhere in the silence that followed, the crown prince whispered into the dark, I told you I wouldn't lose you twice. Chapter 7, Threads of Control. The palace moved differently now, like a game already decided, every piece quietly falling into place. Orders passed through sealed corridors, allies found themselves reassigned, and rumors traveled faster than truth. At the center of it all stood Crown Prince Edward, calm as still water, eyes sharp as glass. And at his side always was General Alex Ravensheir. He had noticed it first in whispers. One captain dismissed, another transferred. His reports delayed. The Duke of Mason, his oldest ally, sent north under imperial request. Within weeks, Alex's network of trust had dissolved like sand in a tide. When he confronted the council, they only bowed and murmured, by royal command, by Edward's command. That evening, Edward summoned him again. No explanation, only urgency. The chamber was dimly lit, the scent of incense curling in the air. Your Highness, my men are being moved without my knowledge. If this continues, I can't guarantee the capital's stability. Alex said evenly. Edward didn't look up from the parchment he was signing. You mean your stability? I mean efficiency. Edward's pen stilled. I'm making changes to protect you. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask for your permission. Every man around you answers to me now. You should find that comforting. Edward replied, finally lifting his gaze. Comfort isn't what I need. Trust is. Alex said. Edward rose from behind the desk. You think I don't trust you? I think you trust no one. The silence that followed was thick, electric. Edward stepped closer, his tone softening. You're right. I don't. But I depend on you. There's a difference. Dependence isn't loyalty. Edward smiled faintly. No, but it binds stronger. Alex took a step back. Whatever you're planning, it's isolating us both. That's the point. If no one can stand between us, then no one can betray us. Edward's voice dropped. He turned away before Alex could answer. Tomorrow, there will be a ceremony, a renewal of the Crown's Guard. You'll be honored, officially appointed to my personal command, Edward said. Alex frowned. That's unnecessary. It's already decreed. It's not punishment, Alex. It's protection. You'll understand soon. Edward's expression softened, almost pleading beneath the composure. The next evening, the throne hall was ablaze with torchlight. Nobles filled the balconies in their jeweled silence as the crown prince stood at the dais, flanked by priests and banners. Alex knelt before him, the weight of ceremony pressing heavier than his armor. The High Chamberlain's voice echoed. By decree of His Imperial Highness, the general shall take the oath of binding, swearing body and blade to the heir of the crown, in service unbroken until death or release. The words rang ancient and final. Alex's pulse beat slow and hard. Edward stepped down from the dais, carrying a sword, silver-edged, its hilt wrapped in black silk. His tone was soft enough that only Alex could hear. Raise your head. Alex obeyed. Their eyes met. The crowd faded to nothing. Repeat after me, Edward said. I swear. Alex began, voice steady. I swear, Edward echoed, as if the vow were his own. To guard the life and honor of the crown prince. Edward's gaze didn't waver. To guard the one who guards me. To stand by his side, in battle and in peace. Alex continued. Edward's lips curved faintly. In life and in loss. Alex hesitated. The line wasn't part of the ritual. But Edward's eyes held him there, unblinking. He finished the oath, the words feeling heavier than iron. When he bowed his head, Edward touched the flat of the blade to his shoulder, then his heart. Rise, my guard, Edward said softly. Applause rippled through the hall, polite and hollow. Alex stood, the ceremony complete, but the air between them thrummed like a drawn bowstring. Edward leaned close, voice low enough that only Alex could hear. Now no one can take you from me, not even the Emperor. Alex stared at him, unable to disguise the unease tightening in his chest. This isn't loyalty, he said quietly. It's ownership. Edward's gaze softened, tender, dangerous. Then be owned by no one else. He turned back to the court, smiling as if the evening were a triumph, while Alex stood motionless beneath the roar of celebration. Later, when the hall was empty and the torches burned low, Alex lingered by the balcony, staring at the rain-slicked city below. His oath still echoed in his head, each word feeling less like duty, more like a chain. Behind him, Edward's voice carried softly from the shadows. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be quieter. Alex didn't turn. Will it? Edward's footsteps stopped beside him. No, but you'll get used to it, he said. Their reflections met in the glass. Two figures bound by the same crown, the same ghosts, and a promise neither could escape. Outside, the storm clouds began to gather again, waiting. Chapter 8: A Marriage of Chains. The capital had never seen such a wedding. Bells tolled from the citadel towers, their echoes swallowed by the murmur of 1,000 gathered nobles. Silk banners unfurled from the palace gates, crimson and gold, the colors of conquest. But beneath the ceremony's splendor lay unease. Edward stood at the altar, regal in black and silver, the crown gleaming like a threat. His gaze never once left the door as he waited for Alex. Every breath, every heartbeat felt rehearsed, except the one that wasn't. When Alex finally appeared, clad in ceremonial armor instead of silk, the hall fell silent. He moved with the same measured grace he carried on the battlefield, but his eyes were cold steel. General Alex Ravensheir, by decree of His Imperial Highness, You are to be bound in union with the crown, an alliance of strength, of blood, and of empire. The high priest declared. The emperor's jaw tightened from his throne. This is not alliance, it's a display of possession, he muttered. But Edward only smiled, unbothered. Call it what you wish, father. The realm will call it peace. As the vows began, Alex's voice was steady though stripped of warmth. I pledge my loyalty to the crown, my sword, my life, my honor. Edward's turn came, and he spoke not to the hall, but to the man before him. I pledge my protection, my trust, and my claim, he said softly. The audience heard devotion. Alex heard ownership. When the priest pronounced them united, Edward lifted the ring, a black band engraved with the royal crest, and slid it onto Alex's finger. His touch lingered, deliberate, as if marking territory rather than exchanging promises. The nobles applauded, the sound thin and forced. The emperor's eyes burned with fury, but his words died on his tongue. The decree had been sealed, the ceremony blessed. He could not stop what had already become law. Edward turned to the crowd, smiling the way a wolf might bare its teeth. Let the realm witness this day, he declared, where sword and crown become one. And the court bowed, as if it were celebration rather than surrender. When the hall finally emptied, the air between Edward and Alex grew heavier. The crown prince stood near the window, watching the storm roll over the city. You look like a man who's been sentenced, Edward murmured without turning. Alex's voice was low. You didn't ask. You commanded. Don't mistake obedience for consent. Edward faced him, eyes dark. This was never about consent. It's about survival. You've seen the Emperor's games. He would have used you against me. I won't allow that. You've just done the same thing, Alex shot back. You've turned me into a symbol. Your victory, your shield. Edward stepped closer, his expression unreadable. You think I wanted this for politics? You arranged a wedding to secure your throne. No, I arranged it so no one could take you from my side again. His voice dropped. Silence stretched, sharp as glass. Alex looked at him. This man who had once been a boy chasing sunlight and laughter, and saw the shadow that grief had carved out of him. Edward, this isn't love. It's a chain, he said quietly. Edward's hand found his face, fingers trembling despite his control. Then wear it until it breaks, he whispered. Their eyes met, defiance against longing, duty against desire. And before Alex could pull away, Edward kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was possession and grief and desperation, all at once. The kind of kiss that left no room for air or forgiveness. Alex pushed him back, breath ragged. Enough. Edward's voice cracked. You can hate me, but don't pretend you don't feel it. I feel pity, and pity isn't what you want, Alex said. Edward laughed, quiet, broken. No, I want the part of you that still remembers her. The boy who smiled at me before the world taught us how to lie. Alex turned away. That boy's dead. You buried him. For a moment Edward said nothing. Then softly, then I suppose this marriage is a funeral. Later that night, when the palace had gone silent, Alex stood alone on the balcony, the ring cold against his skin. Below, the city lights flickered like dying embers. Inside, Edward watched him from the shadows. His crown set aside, his expression unreadable. Two men bound not by love, but by loss, by empire, by the threads of control neither could untangle. And outside, thunder rolled again over the capital, heralding another storm. Chapter 9: The Emperor's Countermove. The palace was unusually quiet that night. Too quiet. Alex felt it before he saw it. A heaviness in the corridors, the kind that warned soldiers before ambushes. His instincts screamed as he turned the corner toward the royal chambers. Then came the noise. A muffled clash, a cut-off cry, the sound of boots sliding against marble. He ran. The guards at Edward's door were down. Two lifeless bodies, blood pooling beneath their armor. Edward! Alex burst through. Inside, chaos reigned. One assassin already lay dead near the balcony. throat cut clean. Another lunged from the shadows, blade glinting toward Edward's chest. Alex's sword was out before thought. Steel met steel. Sparks flew. The assassin snarled, pressing forward. But Alex twisted, disarmed, and drove his dagger home. The man collapsed with a wet gasp. For a moment, only their ragged breaths filled the room. Edward stood motionless in the center. His white shirt splattered with blood that wasn't his own. Slowly, he turned to face Alex. "They came for me here, in my own chamber," he said softly. Alex's pulse pounded. "Who sent them?" Edward's gaze was cold, calculating. "Who do you think?" The question wasn't a question. Not until we know for certain," Alex warned. Edward stepped over the assassin's body, his expression unreadable. "My father's signature was on their orders, hidden under a false seal, but not hidden well enough." Alex's stomach sank. "You can't know that." "I can, and I will make the realm know it too," Edward said. By morning, the court was in uproar. The crown prince had survived an assassination attempt. The emperor was silent behind closed doors. Edward wasted no time. The throne room was filled by midday. Nobles, ministers, guards, all gathered under banners of mourning that already felt like pretense. Alex stood near the dais, armor still stained with the knight's blood. He wanted to believe there'd be restraint. He wanted to believe the boy he once knew still lingered somewhere behind the crown. Edward entered to thunderous silence. His presence commanded the air itself, composed, immaculate, a vision of control. He raised the bloodied assassin's mask high before the crowd. "This was found in my chamber last night. My guards slain. My life forfeit had fate not intervened," he declared. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Edward's gaze swept the room and landed on the throne where the emperor sat, pale and trembling. "My father taught me that power demands sacrifice. I learned well." "Enough, Edward, you speak like an accuser, not a son," the emperor rasped. "Then answer me as a ruler, not a father. Why were men in your command found in my private quarters? Why did their orders bear your seal?" Edward's voice was sharp, deadly. The emperor rose, fury shaking his voice. "Because you've become a danger, to this court, to this empire, to yourself. I tried to stop you before you destroy everything." Edward's laugh was soft, merciless. "And so you sent blades to do what your words could not." "Edward, don't." Alex started, but Edward's hand lifted sharply, silencing him. "Guards, seize him," Edward said. The hall erupted. Ministers gasped, soldiers hesitated, but the command was law. The emperor's personal guards faltered, uncertain who still held authority. The old man's voice broke. "You would arrest your own blood?" "I would preserve the realm," Edward said, his tone hollow. "Even from its maker." The emperor was dragged to his knees before the throne he had built. For a heartbeat, Edward seemed to waver, eyes flickering with something like sorrow, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "By the authority vested in me as crown prince, I assume full command of the Imperial Council. My father is hereby confined until trial for treason against the heir and empire," Edward declared. The decree struck like thunder. Alex watched, numb. The nobles bowed, fearful and obedient. Edward's triumph was absolute and terrifying. When the hall emptied, Alex confronted him. "You've crossed a line you can't return from." Edward faced him, expression unreadable. "He crossed it first. Then stop walking in his footsteps." Edward smiled faintly, a shadow of what once was. "You think I wanted this? That I enjoy the blood? I think you've forgotten where it ends. And when it does, there won't be anyone left to pull you back," Alex said. Edward stepped close, too close. "You already did last night. You saved my life. So tell me, Alex, was it for your emperor or your prince?" Alex hesitated. The silence said more than words. Edward's hand brushed his arm, almost gentle. "You can't hate me forever. I can try, for both our sakes," Alex said, pulling away. Edward watched him leave, his reflection cast against the darkened throne. half ruler, half ruin. Outside, the city bells rang again, this time not for celebration, but for the birth of a new empire, one forged not by bloodlines, but by blood spilled. And in the echo of those bells, Alex wondered if saving Edward had only damned them both. Chapter 10: Rise of the New Emperor. The palace bells tolled again, deep, thunderous, endless. But this time they rang for no wedding, no birth. They rang for a coronation born of blood. At the heart of the great hall, Edward stood before the throne his father once ruled from. His crown, black iron overlaid with gold, rested on a velvet cushion, waiting. The emperor was gone, officially exiled for treason, unofficially disappeared. The court whispered, but none dared ask where the body lay. Edward raised his head as the high priest recited the rites. By divine right and imperial will, we anoint Edward V, sovereign of the empire, guardian of the crown. The priest lifted the crown. Edward took it from him before he could lower it and set it upon his own brow. I need no man's blessing, only loyalty, he said softly. The hall bowed as one. Applause followed, a forced, trembling sound. And at the foot of the dais, silent as shadow, stood Alex. His armor gleamed under the torchlight, but his expression was unreadable. He didn't kneel. He didn't speak. He only watched. Edward's gaze found him instantly, lingering there like gravity itself. That night, the celebrations stretched across the city. Fireworks thundered in the sky while the palace drowned in wine and false laughter. But inside the emperor's private chamber, the mood was colder. Edward stood before the mirror, crown tilted slightly askew, his reflection split by candlelight. Alex entered when summoned, bowing stiffly. You called for me, your majesty. Edward turned. You always did hate titles. I respect what they represent. Do you? Because lately, it feels like you respect distance more. Edward stepped closer. Alex's voice was calm, measured. You're emperor now. You don't need my closeness. Edward smiled thinly. Don't I? He circled Alex slowly, like a predator assessing prey. Every emperor has his pillar, his anchor. You're mine. The court knows it. The army knows it. You will remain by my side. As commander? Alex asked. As everything. Alex stiffened. You can't decree that. I just did. Edward's tone sharpened, almost playful. First decree of the new reign. General Alex Ravensheir shall remain in the emperor's service, body and loyalty bound to the throne. You mean to you? Edward met his eyes. Yes, to me. The words hung between them, heavy as the crown itself. Alex's hands curled into fists. You're turning the empire into a reflection of your grief. And you, Edward murmured, into the cure. He reached out, brushing a gloved thumb along Alex's jaw. You don't know what it's like. Waking every night hearing her name in my head, seeing her face in yours. Alex's voice broke like steel under strain. Then stop looking for her in me. Edward's smile faltered. I've tried. Try harder. For a heartbeat, something human flickered in Edward's eyes. Remorse, exhaustion, maybe love. But it died under the weight of his need for control. He turned away, voice cold. If you ever leave without my permission, I'll dissolve your command and see your men branded traitors. You know I can. Alex's reply was quiet, trembling with rage. And you'd call that loyalty? I'd call it survival. Edward turned back, expression softening as though the cruelty had never existed. You misunderstand me, Alex. I don't want to cage you. I just can't bear the silence when you're gone. He reached for Alex's hand. Stay. If not for love, then for mercy. Alex looked at him for a long moment. Mercy, he repeated. From the man who killed his father? Edward's fingers tightened around his. From the man who's already lost everything else. The words struck deeper than any command. For a moment, Alex saw not an emperor but the shattered remnants of the boy he'd once known. The one who used to chase laughter instead of power. But mercy had limits. Alex pulled his hand free. Then keep your empire, your majesty. I'll guard it. But don't mistake my duty for devotion. Edward watched him go, expression unreadable. When the door closed, he whispered into the empty room. You can call it what you want. It's still mine. Outside, thunder rolled across the city once more. The people cheered for their new emperor, unaware of the chains forged that night. Chains of silk, duty, and obsession. And in the dark, Edward removed his crown and pressed it against his chest, as if to silence the ache beneath. Even kings need someone to worship their ruin. He murmured to the shadows. Chapter 11. Beneath the crown. The great hall reeked of iron and incense. 3 nobles knelt before the throne. Once proud men, now reduced to trembling shapes beneath the emperor's gaze. Their crimes were the same: hesitation. They had delayed their loyalty, spoken too softly in defense of the deposed emperor. Edward sat upon the throne in silence, one gloved finger tapping against the armrest. Each sound struck like a heartbeat in the stillness. Alex stood beside him, rigid, watching the condemned. The guards waited for Edward's signal. Your Majesty, said the eldest noble, voice shaking. We served the crown faithfully, our families. Edward's eyes narrowed. You served my father's fear, not my rule. The noble bowed so low his forehead touched marble. Please, mercy, my emperor. Mercy? Edward repeated softly, as though testing the word on his tongue. Yes, I remember that concept. His voice sharpened. Where was mercy when assassins entered my chamber? When my allies were hunted? When my blood was almost spilled in my sleep? He stood, descending the dais one step at a time. No, mercy is for those who can afford to forget, he said quietly. He gestured. The guards stepped forward. Wait. The single word came from Alex. Steady, restrained, but enough to freeze the room. Edward turned his head slightly. Careful, General. They're not enemies. They're frightened men trying to survive the storm we built. Alex said. Edward's smile was thin. Your rule is already secure. Killing them only feeds your fear. You can't lead through vengeance forever. Alex pressed. Something flickered in Edward's eyes. A crack in the iron mask. Come, walk with me, he said at last, voice low. The guards hesitated, unsure, until Edward raised a hand. Remove them, not the heads, just the men, he ordered. The nobles were dragged out, alive but shaken. When the doors closed, silence filled the hall again. Edward walked toward the stained glass window, its light casting fractured color across his face. You think I've become my father, he said. I think you're fighting ghosts he left behind, and you're losing. Alex replied. Edward turned, something fierce behind his exhaustion. You speak as though you understand what it costs to hold an empire together. I understand what it costs to lose yourself keeping it. Edward's composure broke. He stepped forward quickly, seizing Alex by the collar. You think I want this? Every decree, every execution. I hear them in my sleep. I see her face, yours, the crown. Everything I've killed just to keep control. His voice cracked. Alex didn't flinch. Then stop before there's nothing left of you to save. For a long moment, Edward just stared at him, chest heaving, hand trembling. Then his grip loosened. His voice dropped to a whisper. You still talk to me like I'm the same man you grew up with, because part of you still is, the part that hasn't learned how to stop bleeding. Alex said. Something in Edward broke then, some wall, some defense. He stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't the cruel, claiming kiss of before. It was desperate, raw and pleading, like a confession trapped between breaths. Alex froze, the world narrowing to the taste of salt and silence. When Edward pulled back, his voice was barely there. When you look at me like that, I almost believe I can be forgiven, he whispered. Then prove it. Start with mercy. Alex said quietly. Edward's hand lingered against his cheek for a heartbeat before falling away. The distance between them returned like a wound reopening. He straightened, his expression settling back into cold authority. Release the prisoners, he ordered. Strip their titles, keep their lives. Yes, your majesty, said the captain at the door. When the soldiers had gone, Edward turned to Alex once more. His tone was composed, almost gentle. You see, I can be merciful. You can be human, Alex corrected. When you let yourself. Edward's eyes darkened. And when I don't? Then you're everything you swore to destroy. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the air. Finally, Edward looked away, his voice low. Stay tonight. I won't ask you again. Alex hesitated. If I say no? Then I'll remind you tomorrow that even mercy has its limits. Edward said softly. Later, when Alex was gone, Edward sat alone on the throne. The candles burned low, shadows curling like smoke around his shoulders. He touched his lips where Alex's had been, and for the first time in months, the new emperor looked afraid. Outside, the bells tolled again, distant, hollow, echoing through a city that slept beneath the weight of its ruler's fragile heart. Chapter 12, The Burning Palace. The capital was burning again. From the highest balcony of the Imperial Tower, Alex could see the smoke coiling above the rooftops, dark ribbons twisting against the pale dawn. The rebellion had started in the South Quarter, but the flames were spreading faster than the soldiers could contain them. He turned sharply when the doors slammed open behind him. Edward entered, cloak trailing like shadow. His crown was gone, his hair unbound, his eyes sharp with sleeplessness. They dared raise arms against me, my own councilmen. Men I fed, armed, trusted. He said, voice raw. Not all of them. The riots started over rations, not treason. The people are starving. Alex said evenly. Edward laughed, a short, brittle sound. So they burn their emperor's city as thanks? They burn to be heard, Alex replied. Edward's gaze flicked toward him, and for a moment, Alex saw it again. The flicker of the boy he once knew, the one who grieved, not raged. But it vanished beneath the hard gleam of paranoia. I know what this is. They're coming for me. The nobles whisper rebellion. The generals conspire in my name. I should have cut deeper when I had the chance. Edward said. You've cut enough. More blood won't keep you safe. Alex said, stepping closer. Edward turned, eyes narrowing. You sound like one of them. I sound like someone who wants this empire to survive you. Alex shot back. The silence that followed was suffocating. The firelight from the city below flickered through the windows, painting Edward's face in red and gold, half light, half ruin. By noon, the courtyard ran with blood. Accusations had become executions. Captains dragged before the throne, questioned, condemned, all in the same breath. Alex stood through it all, jaw clenched, forcing himself to watch. The soldiers obeyed without hesitation now. Fear had replaced loyalty. When the third general fell to his knees, Alex stepped forward. Enough! Edward's head turned slowly. You interrupt your emperor? Your empire is dying while you play judge. You can't keep killing your own command. Alex said. Edward descended from the dais, the hem of his cloak brushing the marble streaked with red. You think I enjoy this? Every time I show mercy, someone stabs me for it. He hissed. Then stop giving them reason to. Edward's hand lashed out suddenly, striking Alex across the face. The hall froze. The sound echoed, sharp and final. Edward's breath shook. Don't ever speak to me like that again. Alex didn't move, didn't flinch. Blood traced a thin line down his cheek. Then start acting like the man you swore to be. For a moment, Edward's composure fractured. Eyes wide, pain flickering beneath fury. Then he turned away. Get out, he whispered. Alex hesitated. Edward, I said get out. The command rang through the hall like a curse. That night, the city burned brighter. Citizens fled through the gates under cover of darkness, escorted by soldiers Alex had bribed with silence and conscience. He moved quietly through the lower districts, disguised under a hood. Every street smelled of smoke and grief. He passed a mother clutching a child, their faces streaked with ash. A boy saluted him, thinking him one of the rebels. Alex couldn't correct him. He turned a corner and froze. Edward's banners were being torn down, trampled into mud. Statues smashed. The people had stopped fearing him. They were too desperate now. "General!" a voice called behind him. It was one of his own men, breathless. The Emperor ordered another purge. The council's next. Alex's stomach turned. "How many?" "All of them, sir." He closed his eyes briefly. "Tell the loyalists to hold their swords. Protect the civilians. If Edward wants a slaughter, he'll do it without us." The soldier nodded, uncertain. "And if he finds out?" "He will, but not tonight," Alex said quietly. When he returned to the palace near dawn, the corridors reeked of smoke and fear. The guards avoided his eyes. He found Edward alone in the throne room, standing amid broken glass and torn banners. The Emperor looked exhausted, haunted. "They're gone, my council, my court, my city. Gone. Tell me, Alex, who's left to betray me now?" Edward said. Alex's voice was low. "Me." Edward turned sharply, eyes dark with madness and hurt. "Don't joke. I'm not. You're destroying everything you said you'd protect. You're not ruling anymore, you're drowning." Alex stepped closer. Edward's expression softened just for a breath. "And you'd let me sink? I'm trying to pull you out." Edward's hands trembled as he reached for him, fingers brushing the edge of Alex's collar. "Then stay with me until it all burns away," he whispered. Alex's heart clenched. "If I stay, it'll burn faster." Edward smiled, small, broken. "Then at least I won't burn alone." Outside, the dawn broke red over the capital, light bleeding through smoke. The empire was still standing, but barely. And beneath the crown, the man who had once dreamed of saving it had become its greatest ruin. Chapter 13, The Breaking Point. The throne room was silent when Edward entered, though silence now felt like the loudest sound in the world. The palace had become a grave. Empty corridors, locked doors, whispers that fled when he passed. He already knew. The reports had come before dawn. Soldiers disobeying, civilians fleeing under secret escort, executions halted without his order. And at the center of every act of defiance, Alex, his general, his anchor, his ruin. Edward walked to the center of the room, boots echoing on marble. "Call for General Alex," he said. His voice didn't tremble, but something in it cracked like frost. Moments later, Alex entered, armor half undone, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. He bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty." Not that tone. Not that distance," Edward said almost gently. Alex didn't move. "You wanted to see me." Edward paced once, slowly. "I hear you've been moving soldiers without my command, opening the gates, smuggling civilians." A pause. "I have." The confession hit like a blade sliding between ribs. Clean, quiet, devastating. Edward turned to face him fully. "You don't even deny it." "I don't have to, you left me no choice," Alex said. "No choice? You betray your emperor and call it necessity." Edward's voice rose. "I saved your people from your madness." The shout rang through the empty hall, startling even the guards outside. Alex's breath came heavy, his composure finally breaking. "You've turned this empire into a pyre, Edward. Every decree is another spark. I couldn't stand by and watch you burn it all." Edward stepped forward, fury and heartbreak twisting his features. "You promised me loyalty. I promised to protect the crown, not destroy it with you." Alex shot back. Something inside Edward snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing Alex by the throat and slamming him against a pillar. "Everything I've done, everything, was for you." Alex's hands came up, gripping his wrist, not in fear but restraint. "No, Edward. You did it for control, for the ghost of what you lost." Edward's breath trembled, the rage in his eyes flickering into anguish. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to become a monster? I just wanted you." His voice cracked. Alex's expression faltered. "You lost me the moment you tried to own me." For a long, unbearable moment, neither moved. The fire from the braziers painted them both in gold and shadow, warrior and king, bound by love and ruin. Then Edward's hand loosened. His voice was a whisper. "If you'd just stayed, I could have been better." Alex shook his head, the faintest tremor in his voice. "You needed saving, Edward. But not by me." The words shattered what little was left. Edward's lips crashed against his. Rough, desperate. A collision of rage and longing. Alex didn't respond at first, but when Edward's trembling hand found the back of his neck, he gave in for one heartbeat. One fleeting, devastating heartbeat. The kiss tasted of smoke and grief. It was the last thing either of them truly shared. When Alex pulled away, he did it slowly, like tearing himself free of something sacred. "This has to end." Edward's voice was barely audible. "Then end me." Alex stepped back. "Don't ask that of me. Who else will? Everyone else I've killed or driven away. You're the only one left who can still hurt me," Edward said bitterly. Alex's jaw clenched. "And that's exactly why I won't." Edward's laugh was broken, hollow. "You'll lead them, won't you? Against me. I'll lead them for the Empire, even if it means facing you," Alex said. Edward's gaze softened, almost tender through the tears he refused to shed. "Then I'll wait for you on the battlefield. Maybe then, I'll finally have all of you." Alex's eyes hardened, but his voice cracked. "You already do. You always have." He turned and walked toward the door. Edward didn't stop him. When the doors closed, Edward sank to his knees in the center of the room, the echo of footsteps fading into silence. His crown slipped from his head, rolling across the floor until it struck the marble with a dull, final sound. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered into the empty air. "Then come, my general. Let's finish what we began." Outside, thunder rolled over the capital. The rebellion was no longer rumor, it was war. And in the heart of the burning palace, the two men who once shared a single dream now stood on opposite sides of destiny. Chapter 14: The Last Stand. The gates of the capital shattered at dawn. The sound rolled through the streets like thunder, followed by the roar of thousands. Banners of rebellion tore through the smoke, the once proud crest of the Empire burning above them. At their head rode Alex. His armor was blackened with ash, his sword drawn but his eyes hollow. He had no triumph in him, only necessity. "Push forward," he shouted over the clash of steel. "No one touches the civilians. Our fight is with the crown." Soldiers obeyed, moving through flame and rubble. The city bled around them, the people watching from doorways as the empire they had once feared finally fell. Inside the palace, Edward stood before a cracked mirror. The reflection staring back was unrecognizable. A man with blood on his collar and madness in his eyes. The weight of the crown on his brow felt heavier than steel. Outside, screams drew closer. He turned when the doors burst open. His father, the old emperor, was dragged in by the guards who still remained. The once mighty ruler now trembled, stripped of dignity and command. "Edward," the old man rasped, "you've doomed us all." Edward stared at him for a long moment, then drew his sword. "No, father, I freed us." The emperor's eyes widened just before the blade struck. The cut was clean, merciful, almost. The body fell without a sound. Edward stood there, chest heaving, as blood pooled at his feet. Now there's no one left to betray me," he whispered. By the time Alex reached the palace gates, the guards had surrendered or fled. He moved through the halls like a shadow, sword steady in his hand. The air smelled of death and burnt silk. He found Edward in the throne room, standing over his father's corpse. The crown was still on his head, though it glinted now with red. Alex froze. "Edward." The new emperor turned slowly, lips curling into something between a smile and a grimace. "You came as you promised," he murmured. "Is this what you wanted? To stand alone on a mountain of your own dead?" Alex's voice broke the silence. Edward tilted his head. "You made me alone. I tried to save you. By tearing down everything I built? By saving what you couldn't." The words collided like sword strikes, the tension sparking in the air between them. Edward descended the dais, blade in hand. If this is how it ends, then end it with me. One last fight, Alex. I didn't come to kill you. Then you came to die. Their swords clashed, the sound ringing through the ruined hall. Edward fought with fury and grief, each strike a confession. Alex met him with restraint, parrying rather than killing. Why do you hold back? You're stronger than this. Edward spat. Because I still... Alex's blade trembled as their swords locked. I still care. Edward's breath hitched. The fight faltered for half a second. Then, with a twist of his wrist, he disarmed Alex. The sword skidded across the marble, clattering at the foot of the throne. Edward pressed his own blade to Alex's chest. Say it, say you hate me, he demanded. I don't. Say you love me. Alex's voice was a whisper. I did. That broke him. Edward's sword dropped from his hand, clanging uselessly to the floor. He staggered back, laughter dissolving into a sob. Then there's nothing left for me. Before Alex could move, Edward turned the blade toward himself. No! Alex lunged forward, but Edward was faster. The sword slid between his ribs, the steel blooming red. He gasped, collapsing against Alex's arms, fingers clutching at the fabric of his uniform. You weren't supposed to. Alex's voice cracked, catching him as he fell. Edward smiled faintly through the pain. Now, you'll never leave me. Edward, please, stay with me. I told you, I'd give you everything. His breath hitched. Even this. Alex pressed his forehead against Edward's, feeling the warmth already fading. You could have lived. And be what? Edward whispered. Without the crown. Without you? Silence. Then, softly, Edward's last breath escaped like a secret. At least now, I'm free. His body went still. Alex sat there, holding him as the fires outside painted the throne room in red and gold. The crown slipped from Edward's head, rolling across the floor until it came to rest at Alex's knees. He looked down at it, then at the man in his arms and whispered, You were never my enemy. When dawn broke over the capital, the banners of rebellion rose above the walls. The palace stood blackened but unbroken, and within its heart, among the ruins of gold and grief, Alex knelt alone, mourning the man who had loved him too much, too wrongly, and far too late. Chapter 15: The Crown's Shadow. The Empire was quiet again. Months had passed since the fires died, but their scent still lingered in the stones of the capital. Rebuilding had begun, slow, deliberate, painful. The monarchy was gone. The council ruled now by Alex's decree. He refused all titles, though the people called him the General of Peace. He spent his days among the workers, sleeves rolled, speaking little. The palace, once Edward's cage of gold, was stripped of its banners and opened to the public. The throne room remained sealed. He hadn't stepped inside since that morning. General, a young aide said, approaching him one evening as he stood overlooking the river. The last of the soldiers have returned from the border. No resistance left. Alex nodded. Good. Make sure they're fed and dismissed. No more campaigns. The aide hesitated. There's one more thing. A courier arrived from the north. He said it was meant for you alone. The soldier handed him a letter sealed in dark wax, the royal crest pressed into it. Alex's fingers froze. The emblem was unmistakable. A crown eclipsed by shadow. Edward's mark. He dismissed the aide and stood there for a long while, the river whispering below, the sunset bleeding gold into the water. Finally, he broke the seal. The handwriting inside was Edward's. Precise, elegant, painfully familiar. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have done what I could not. I once thought the crown would make me whole. Instead, it hollowed me until only you filled the emptiness. I tried to keep you beside me, even when it meant destroying everything else. For that, I can never ask forgiveness. But if there is another life, without thrones, without blood, without the ghosts between us, then I will find you first. Not as your emperor, not as your captor, but as the man who loved you too much to let you go. Edward. The letter trembled in his hand. For a long time he said nothing. The wind caught the edge of the paper, and he could almost hear Edward's voice in it, soft, sharp, alive. When the sun sank, Alex folded the letter carefully and set it atop a candle flame. The parchment curled, edges glowing red before turning to ash. "Then let it be another life," he murmured. The words barely carried beyond his breath, but they felt final. An oath, not a goodbye. Later that night, he walked the palace grounds alone. The moonlight silvered the ruins, softening their scars. In the courtyard, the once grand statue of the royal line had been toppled, its marble crown cracked in two. He stopped where the throne room doors stood closed, touched the scorched wood, and whispered, "You were right about one thing. The world did need saving. But so did you." His voice lingered, swallowed by silence. When dawn came, the city was awake before him. Vendors setting up stalls, children laughing among the rubble. The sound was fragile, but it was life. He stood on the balcony, the same one where Edward had once watched over his empire. The rising sun painted the city gold, chasing away the last of the night's shadows. A soldier approached quietly. "The council awaits, sir. I'll join them soon." The soldier saluted and left him there. Alex stayed, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sunlight touched his face, warm and relentless, and for a heartbeat, just one. He thought he saw Edward beside him, smiling as he had in youth, unburdened, whole. Then the vision faded, leaving only the light. Alex exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. The war was over. The crown had fallen. The empire lived. And somewhere, beyond time, beyond ruin, he hoped Edward lived too. As the first bells of morning rang through the capital, Alex turned and walked down from the balcony, leaving the sunlight behind. The letter's ashes had scattered on the wind, carried into the open sky, like a promise reborn, a shadow lifted from the crown. And when the dawn finally broke over the city, it was quiet, gentle, and full of ghosts.